Hi there, it is Michelle Patterson, and we are back after a week-long vacation. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to my producer who basically called me up last Friday and said, you know what, we have been working our ass off. And he did not say that, use those words, but Connor, I just want to say thank you so much. You make it fun for me to keep doing what I love to do, and that is provide resources and tools for women and men out there so that we can be better together. And I needed a break. And what happened was that break brought so many cool results. Like I'm thrilled to share with you guys because it has been nothing short of what we do. And you've heard me coin this phrase from Laura Sticola. She said, you guys crowdsource miracles. And the person that I'm going to introduce to you guys all was on that call when that actually happened. And then I'm going to tell you about how we met. And also I reached out to my bestie over here who helps me with all my wild hair projects, Rose Tafoya. And we're going to talk, but this is what this is all about, is we have actually found a tool. And this is what happened. And so first off, Dr. Richard Shuster, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
An honor to be here, and this is going to be so much fun.
I know, you're one of my favorite people on the planet right now, because I feel like our geniuses got together and collaborated and just basically put the pieces of the puzzle together so that we can provide these resources for women and men and wellness providers. So let's talk about what happened. And I know you were part of that call, so you were there to witness it. And Rose, I told you about this. So let me just back up and tell you guys what happened. But I had the opportunity to get it introduced to a person named Richard. And he was part of this mastermind group that my very dear friend, J.V. Crum III, started. And it's all filled with individuals that are putting together a podcast. And he has helped me immensely, as he has with Dr. Richard. He helped him as well do his podcast, but said, hey, we're going to be putting you guys together. And then Richard and I decided that we wanted to go ahead and talk on the phone. And I had decided before my conversation, I was going to go ahead and take a quick 2 p.m. meditation, just a 30-minute meditation, which I normally do in the evenings before I go to bed, or like first thing in the morning, like at 4 a.m. That's usually my time. It's never at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So I said to Connor as he came over, I said, yeah, I just got done doing a meditation for a half an hour. I love Dr. Joe Dispenza. And he had this 30-minute meditation, and I was extremely intentional. And I said, what I want is I want somebody that can do assessments. I had a really strong background working with Robert Half for 13 years. And we just did so much work with assessments and really finding out what people needed. And what I was finding and doing the real share was that individuals they didn't know what they needed. And so I knew in doing the California Women's Conference, and Rose, you know this as well, is we did the 5 to Thrive. We did career, physical, financial, social, and then community. And so I put this out there that I want something that does assessments. I want the individual who I need to meet needs to be a PhD in psychology that does assessments. And so I shared this with Connor. We hop on the phone. I tell him, we have this call with Richard, a friend of my good friend, J.V. Crum III. And I don't know anything about his background other than he seems like a great guy. And I got introduced to him very briefly. So Richard gets on, and I asked Richard this question. I said, Richard, tell me about you. And tell me about you. What did you say to me?
I told you I was a clinical psychologist who is the CEO of a psychological assessment company, which measures your 5 pillars.
So I, of course, freak out because I had just got done. And I look at Connor, who's over. This is right pre-COVID-19. And we're recording this. And I look at Connor and I'm like, oh my gosh. I go, this is so awesome, because that's exactly what I just got done meditating. and told Connor. So that's how the party got started. And I then let you know what I've been called to do is really be this platform for specifically for wellness providers. And let's start with wellness providers out of the home so that they can go ahead and give to their family what they need. And lo and behold, when we got back together and I was able to take the assessment, Rose also took it as well. And I've shared it with my team. They're also taking it. But I was so amazed, Richard, just to see what you did with the 5 to Thrive, not even knowing that that was what we had also carved out: career, physical, financial, social, and community. So tell me what you were thinking when you saw our reaction.
Well, I want to even step back a little bit further because obviously this was meant to be, and we both believe that very strongly. But there's one tweak to the story. So JV actually didn't help me launch my podcast. My podcast is 3 years old now. He and I met at a podcast conference. But what's fascinating about it, so I knew who he was, and you know, when you're at a conference, the last person you talk to, like, you really have to muster that energy because you're just so over it, right? It's been 3 days of blah, 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 nonstop. And so, but I recognized him. I went over to him, shook his hand, said, I appreciate what he does, talked to him for a little bit about what I'm doing. We exchanged business cards and that was it. And he said, I've got to go to the airport. Great chatting with you. And I hear nothing for months. And so one day, I'm at the international market because, you know, cooking's my zen, and I'm buying like these ridiculous South American ingredients.
Keep in mind, Richard and I have become really good friends. Like our families totally like dig on each other. We're like, okay, what could we do if we pulled your genius together with my genius? And I've got really smart friends. And what can we, I mean, we've been having so much fun.
No, it's been amazing. And just to show you the connected design in all of this. So I'm at that grocery store, and I see a Colorado number on my caller ID. And I don't usually answer numbers I don't recognize, much like you don't usually meditate at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. But in this instance, I picked up, and it's JV Crum III. And JV said, hey, Richard, you know, it's really interesting. When you and I talked as I was going to the airport, I put your card in my jacket pocket, and I couldn't find your card. And today was the first day that I wore that jacket in several months. But when I pulled it off the coat rack, your card literally, and these are his exact words, flew out of the pocket and landed face up on my desk. And so I knew I was meant to call you. And so that's how he
flew. That's how he describes it.
And he described it as flew out, landed face up with my number on his desk. And so that's how that relationship began. And so then obviously through him, you and I connected, and the rest is history. But it is wild when we look at the tapestry of life, how all these things come together at the right time and for the right reason. It's really exciting.
It's so awesome. I know. And especially hearing from you. I mean, you have this phenomenal story too, where you're on a mission. I mean, you are truly on a mission. And that's why when we first met, we ended up having this lengthy conversation, and it was awesome because with the mastermind, I really was like, even on the call, both of us were like, okay, can we get on another call outside of this mastermind? Because we knew once we started sharing what each other was focused on, we knew that we could be better together.
Yeah, you and I are like chocolate and peanut butter. We're very good by ourselves, but together, that's really like.
So I told the team about you. I'm like, we got another genius. He's on the team. And so I was telling Rose, and she is extremely, she's very, let's just say, she will tell you what she thinks. I mean, she loves her sister that much. I mean, she's a true trusted advisor. And she'll tell me, even when I don't want to hear it, she'll tell me what she thinks.
Let me ask Rose, where are you from? Because this is leading to a theory.
Oh my God. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Great to see you here. I love your story about how you met JV Crum, and that's just so totally, like, I call them God winks. but I'm coming from Lake Tahoe. I live in Lake Tahoe, California.
All right, so you just ruined my theory. I was going to inquire as to if Rose was from the Midwest, because Midwesterners are notorious for telling you exactly how it is without sugarcoating anything. So maybe you've got some Midwest genes in you somewhere, Rose. But
well, you know what? When I used to go skiing, people used to say to me, "What's that accent? Are you from the South?"
Minnesota, from the South. Okay.
They thought maybe that's where I was from originally. Who knows?
I thought that. I mean, Rose, I think that about you too. Like Minnesota people are they're kind people. And I think where Rose is just, I mean, we traveled together, Richard. So Rose, when I had my very first conference and I was 1.8 million in a deficit, Rose kept the team totally focused on the programming. We had 18,000 people sign up to be a speaker at the conference, and we had room for 200 speakers. And so she had the daunting task of really going through and finding out of all those people, who would take on these coveted speaking roles. And then it left me the time to focus on building up. When we were $100,000, is what we had, and we owed 1.8 million. And so we raised 1.65 million, and she did not miss a beat. I mean, she was like locked and loaded. This is what we need to do. We had this family member, Robert and Laura Styler, Rose, that moved in.
Yeah.
This family that moved in. And so very much, this is very, very serendipitous. So when I told her about you and the meditation, I had forgotten. That to me is huge. When the card came flying out, I mean, JV was so excited to introduce the two of us. And I want you to tell Rose too about your experience, because I think it's led us to this point of doing this mission together.
When you say experience, are you talking my story and what led me to doing what I'm doing? Okay. So just wanted to be clear. So yeah, it's really interesting. I just did a TED Talk and I shared this. One of the things that a lot of people who know me today and really weren't around me when I was young and in my early 20s, and I was really a jerk. I mean, I will own that. And I wasn't raised that way. I had wonderful parents. My mom was a school teacher till she didn't have to be and was always there for us. And my dad was a dentist, and he used to give away dentistry to kids whose families couldn't afford it to fix their mouths. And so I had the lessons, but I got out of college and just like, I got this corporate job and IT sales, and I turned into a monster and just became so focused on money, and not just money, but like having stuff for the sake of having stuff. And ultimately I started my own company, and I got really lucky and won a government contract with the Department of Defense I had no business winning at all. I was like 23, 24 years old. And we won this contract, and it wasn't weapons or anything, nefarious. It was securing IT records for the military, for the medical records. And, I had that background and the pedigree to do that. But as that started happening, I became so obsessed with stuff I was going to get. I would literally like get on the internet and look up on eBay private islands. You can get islands on eBay. You can. And I would, because I was going to name an island after myself. That's what a jerk I was. And I was, was going to get a private jet and all of these things that I had to have because it was my destiny. I used to refer to it as the Shuster Empire, and I was going to have all these glorious things in my life. And then one day on a Saturday when I was going to go have dinner with a cousin, I was making a left-hand turn, and I was looking up in the middle of the intersection, and I see this car just screaming at me. And I knew right then and there that I was going to die. And what's really interesting, and now that I am a clinical psychologist and know all about the brain, I can talk about this intelligently because I didn't understand it at the time. There's a phenomenon known as tachypsychia, and that's basically when we experience a slowing of time. So if anybody watching this has ever seen the movie The Matrix, and when those bullets are flying by Neo in slow motion, that's basically what I went through, and what a lot of soldiers go through when they're in combat. It's not your life flashing before your eyes. It's that everything slows down. So in maybe 3 seconds from when this car creams my side as I'm just helplessly sitting in the intersection, and my airbag's going off, and I'm spinning in traffic. And then I hit a telephone pole, ultimately is what stopped my momentum, maybe 3 seconds. But it was this very surreal experience where I'm having this conversation with myself about my death and what that means. And it wasn't this conversation like, I was praying to God, oh, dear Lord, if you let me live tomorrow, I'm going to deliver Christmas presents to orphan boys or girls. No, I was dead. I was toast. And I became so ashamed and guilty because I knew, like, my parents were out to dinner with friends. They're going to get a call. I'm dead. My brother's going to get a call. I'm dead. And I started thinking about this car, and I started thinking about all these stupid things that I wanted, and none of it gets to go with me. I didn't have any real impact in the world. I just became so selfish, and I was really ashamed. And so, surprise, I'm alive. I didn't die. But I broke my back. I, nearly tore every ligament in my neck. I had a number of severe internal injuries, and it took a really long time to recover. And that was really the beginning for me of what started me ultimately on this path. I would love to say that I shook my fist in the hospital bed and said, from now on, I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping people. It didn't happen that way. It was something that evolved over a couple of years for me, but that was really the catalyst that transformed everything that I'm doing today.
That's such a powerful story. And can you imagine, Rose? I mean, here we're talking on the phone, and we had a Zoom call, and right away it just connected because I was telling him about the Patterson playground and creating this playground and only bringing 100% joy into your life. And it's like, no asshole policy. We're not going to, be able to bring anything with us. Here I'm being told 90 days. He's got this amazing story. And so we connected on just an entirely different level.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of sharedness there. And I forgot that we can swear on this show. That's really exciting to me. We don't use profanity on the daily helpings. This is awesome. But yeah, it's like you have these moments, and then it's what happens next. So I had a choice at that moment. And anybody who's been through something traumatic has a choice. They either can turn inward and accept defeat or blame the world or the universe or circumstances. I could have been mad at that 17-year-old kid who broke my spine. I'm not. I'm really glad that he wasn't really hurt. His PlayStation 2 was destroyed. He was upset about that. That was in his back seat. But, this was the best thing that ever happened to me, period. And it began this series because I went back to work. I recovered. And when I go back to my job, I am more miserable than I've ever been in my life. And I keep having this thing gnawing at me like, this is not your life. Like, you are not meant to do this anymore, right? And ultimately, I just walked away. But it took me 2 years to muster the courage. And this is something that I talk a lot about when I'm on different platforms is, obviously I don't want anybody to have to go through what I went through, but usually what motivates us or keeps us from making change is fear. And so I was so afraid of what would happen. Like I was going to let people down. I was going to let my parents down, all my friends. I told everybody in the world, when you start a business, you're like to the rooftops, I am going to be this great success. And I was now having to admit to everybody in my life that I flat out was a failure in that regard. And so I walked away from the business. I had no idea what in the hell I was going to do with my life. I was really depressed, probably the most depressed I'd ever been. I was terrified. And then, one of these serendipitous moments. So, back then they didn't have Instacart. I don't know what the hell I'd be doing today otherwise, because my life changed in the grocery store. I went to the grocery store and I hear these two women freaking out about their teenage daughters on social media and bikini pictures and chucking the deuce, and they're freaking out. And what do we do? And I interjected and I just said, hey, I've got a background in network security. Let me tell you a couple of things to keep your family safe online. And I said those things, no agenda, just trying to be helpful, right? And there was like this
family. I remember we talked about this because you responded similar to what I refer to as Papa Bear. Mama Bear to Papa Bear. I mean, we're just sharing family to family what we know. And I refer to this as the shit has already hit the fan.
Yeah.
It's already, things are already broken out there. So what can we do to be able to share what it is that we know. And that's what you did. I mean, thank God that you did that too.
Because it changed my life, because the next thing that happened was they looked at each other, their eyes got huge, like in a cartoon, like Roger Rabbit, and they freaked out. And they said, well, please come speak to our PTA. It's not like I had anything else to do. And so now, again, like, I'm not trying to sell anything. I don't have an agenda. I'm just standing in front of a bunch of parents at a high school, and I'm speaking. And I'm saying, I made a little PowerPoint presentation for the first time in I don't know how long. It had little funny things in it. And at the end of it, this police officer, I didn't know he was a police officer, but he comes up to me and he said, I'm on the city cybercrime squad, and you are a really good speaker, and you can say things as a civilian that we can't say in law enforcement. Now I'm teaming up, and now I'm doing something. And then at one of those things, a guidance counselor comes up to me and said, boy, you're really good. And hey, listen, we really have a desperate need for male mentors. We have plenty of female mentors, but we've this one young man in particular. He's in the 7th grade. His parents are getting divorced. There's a lot of drama in the home, and he's biting him. You shouldn't be biting in 7th grade, right? and so they said, well, will you mentor him? And I didn't know what that meant, other than I felt like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And so we started meeting week after week. We met for 2 years, 2 straight years. And I'm not so arrogant as to say I'm the reason his life changed, but I know that I was a part of it, and that felt really good to me. So as I'm starting to have these glimpses, like speaking in front of the parents and doing the mentoring, I started to really see this new potential path unfold for me. And now the world is full of these possibilities, right? Like, I didn't have the courage or confidence to go back to graduate school. I didn't think I was that. I thought I was smart, but I didn't think I was graduate school smart. Honestly, I didn't think I was smart enough. And I went back and got my master's and got a 3.95 or something like that. And better than I'd ever done in high school or undergrad. And then went on and got my doctorate in clinical psychology, and got out into the real world, and was like, okay, so now I'm here. I've made it. I'm a psychologist. And it's still, Michelle, I felt like, how can I do more? How can I be more? How can I have a broader impact? And so that's when I started the podcast, which has introduced me to, fortunately, and a privilege to speak to people in over 150 countries every week, which is so cool. And I've had amazing emails from people. My favorite story, and I tell it all the time. And this kid who wrote to me a couple of years ago because he was going to commit suicide.
Story.
Yeah, I mean, mine too. I'm
reading this one on the Real Share, Dr. Richard, because for me, when you said this, it was like, okay, this is why we do what we do.
And the point of this, before I even share the story, Michelle, is that when we put good out into the world, we don't always know what the ripple effects are going to be, but you can rest assured that if you do good, there are going to be these waves that go out that are really cool. So in this instance, this was pretty early on in my show. I got on a podcast, a pretty big show, probably a lot sooner than I should have. And I had some strategy in terms of how I tried to grow my brand, but I got on a pretty good sized show, and there was this young man who had got a gun, loaded the gun, and was going to put it in his mouth and pull the trigger. And right before he decided to do that, he was getting ready to write a suicide tweet. And he gets on Twitter. And it so happens that big show that I was lucky to get on at the time, it ran my story, the story I shared with you about the car accident and everything else that had kind of transpired after that. And so he put his gun down after listening to that. And then he went over to my website, and he stayed up all night, binge listening to my show. He wrote me the next day, and I was crying as I read this email, because it was the most powerful thing that anyone's ever sent to me, electronically or otherwise. He said, "Dear Dr. Richard, last night I was going to commit suicide, but because of you, I want to live. And not only do I want to live, but I want to start a podcast for people with mental illness, so they know that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel." And he left me his phone number. And, Michelle, you and I know each other well enough that, that I'm pretty quick on my feet, and I'm spontaneous, and I can talk, and, I like a microphone. I was fumbling over my words like that 7th grader who's trying to ask out the prettiest girl in school and has no, like, I could not speak to this kid. I didn't know how to talk to him. And something finally came out along the lines of, how can I help you? I'm so grateful to you. This was the kindest thing that anyone's ever said to me. Talk to me about your podcast. And so I went on his show. I helped him with it, and he's successful today, helping other people. And the point of this is when I launched my podcast, there was no part of my brain at any level that ever thought suicide prevention. Yep, let's prevent suicide. No way, right? Like I do these episodes every Veterans Day where I host a veteran who's courageous enough to share their story, and we highlight a nonprofit that they represent. And that came later. But when I came up with the idea for the show, I wasn't thinking about saving a life. But that's what happened. And now this guy is going to be out there for the rest of his life that otherwise wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Who knows how he's going to impact people, and who knows how somebody who hears his story and his show, like you just don't know. And I think that's what's so exciting about, and we don't have to know, that's part of altruism, is you're just doing good work. But I am so grateful for the life I get to have right now, for the relationship, people like you that are in my life. And it makes morning to night fun. I everything that I do is on mission for me. And my mission is to help everybody become the best versions of themselves, even if it's of no direct benefit to me. I do have a lot of free stuff. My podcast is always going to be free. I have turned down sponsorships just because I don't feel like, I haven't heard the right message yet. Like I just want these pure experiences and things for people just to listen and benefit, and hear the wisdom of the people I'm privileged to interview. And so that's what life should be. Life shouldn't be, we get up and we go to a job that we hate and we're stressed out and maybe we're making ends meet, maybe we're making great money, but if the part of you, the passion part of you, isn't alive, then none of it matters. Honestly, like the rest of it is just like everything. The way that I used to describe my life post-accident before I walked away was like watching something in black and white instead of color. Like the whole world was like a shade of gray to me. And I really want people to be empowered to do whatever brings them passion. So, I'm very, very passionate about passion. I'm very passionate about that. And so, that's
too, is that you can see it. We were like little kids. We're still like little kids in a candy store. It's so weird. And I go back to that day that I had gotten on the call. It was 3:00 as I meditated at 2:00. I remember that day so well because as Rose and I talked this morning, she's just like, Michelle, it's been surreal, and again, being a best friend of mine and having these downloads where you are able to physically tap into what you're supposed to do as your essence when you're being who you're supposed to be. And I believe wholeheartedly what you're talking about, Richard, and that is that we are meant to be in our true essence.
Yes.
And our genius, when our genius comes through, like, I keep going back to that day. It's like, how did I know to ask for somebody that did assessments, that was a psychologist, that was a PhD? Literally that was a humanitarian. And I had shared with you, I was putting together is 400 individuals for what's possible. And my business partner, Kotso, who passed away 2 weeks ago, he and I talked about this. And he said, no matter what, we're going to help each other whatever side you're on. And I thought that he was referring to me because I was the one that was given the diagnosis of having 90 days. And I think something shifts in you internally for the good. Like, I would not trade my experience for anything because it taught me how to love myself deeply, so much so that my genius can in turn love others so deeply. And I feel like when we come together, I can't tell the difference between work and play. For me, it's all one and the same.
Yeah.
Like this right now, this is the same for me as work. It's like playtime.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like putting our little, our geniuses together. And I feel like, with the assessments and what you've done, and then bringing human capital to the table and And when I say human capital, I'm not referring, I'm talking about our geniuses collaborating and joining geniuses together so we can crowdsource miracles, which Laura Sicola, our dear friend, had come up with. The three of us on the call, and we get the others on, and we just go into this visionary expression of ourselves. But I feel like when I literally got off that call and had a good cry, because I was and I'm referring to them as happy tears, is what and so creating these happy tears in a place where we are creating products, resources that are made with love. But to have it be where you have an assessment, I want to get into this assessment.
Sure.
Because, and I wanted Rose to come on. I was looking for mine. Rose loved this so much. She sent me hers to read and said, send me yours. I want to look at yours, Michelle, because that's what we've done our life together for the last 20 years. Richard, is sharing our geniuses and coming together and sharing what we know. And you know what happens? Life is 100% enjoyable.
Before we even jump into the assessment, would you mind if I shared why I decided to create this company and the assessments?
I would love
because
it.
I think it's important for people listening to this to understand. So unless you're a psychologist, you probably don't have a lot of access or experience to the psychological assessment industry. And what I will tell you about it is that it's a $7+ billion industry, largely controlled by two players who are, in my opinion, so it's just my opinion, but I have a lot of colleagues that feel similarly, the greediest, least inclusive companies I have ever been exposed to.
You know, when you just said that, like literally, because I have the same challenge with advertisers, because we want it to be so seamless with our share. Like and we were talking, to the team about this, this past week, in fact, and just having all this coming together, but having it be where no money is exchanged. It's strictly on you showing up the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And identifying that. So continue on with what you were saying, because I think this is so beautiful how it's together.
So here's this really greedy industry who's entirely constructed around finding things wrong with people. So not because the way that the medical industry works is you can't get paid unless you have a diagnostic code to assign to somebody, right? So that means that the tests have to find something wrong enough with you so that they can have that label. And so not only that, the people who need access to these instruments often can't afford them or get access to them. Or you need to pay somebody like me $3,000 to $5,000 to sit in a room with you and explain it to you. And so I said, okay, so I want to create my own assessment company that does the following. One, shows not only areas where somebody can improve, but things that are just awesome about you. Two, you don't need a PhD to explain it to you, that it's self-scoring, self-interpreting, very easy to understand. Three, extremely affordable so that anybody who needed access to it would be able to get access to it. And then the other pillar that I wanted to create this on, these tools, were that people who helped us help other people could benefit from it financially. So no assessment company in the world had ever done all of those things. And I looked because I wanted to see what was the competitive landscape like. And they were all kind of the same. They were all just, these greedy turnkey kind of systems. And so the places that I get really excited about are human potential, because I'm a potential guy, right? So it's all about, being the best version of yourself. Obviously, like there's a scientific corollary there. And so what we started doing a number of years ago when we started building out the research on this was, and we pulled a lot of the data from the Big Five model, which has been empirically validated 1,000 times in the last 50 years. And what we wanted to do was determine what are the dimensions most empirically associated with success in life. Notice I didn't just say success in business, and that's certainly part of it, but I was looking at success in life. And so our flagship assessment, the one that you took, has two flavors. It's called the POWERS, and that I came up with that fun acronym that stands for the Predictor of World-Class Excellence Rating Scales. It just came to me in a moment, just like, things came to Laura in that moment, crowdsourcing miracles. It just popped into my head. I was like, oh my God.
I love acronyms. I love acronyms.
Who doesn't love acronyms? And I was like,
I know, right?
And I was like, there's no way that's not trademarked. There's no way somebody doesn't have the domain. SeekYourPowers.com was available. Nobody had trademarked it. I was like, oh my God, this is really exciting. And so we have different versions of this for the corporate space and the consumer space. But so, we as a company, and our company is called Your Success Insights. We're in human performance. So the powers, we have versions of our tools for athletes, all the way down to itty bitty sixth graders, all the way up to professional athletes and Olympians. We're in the health and wellness space in terms of tools in the addiction and recovery world, trauma for veterans. And here's another one of those Kismet things. We, the way that we began was we acquired a tool for trauma for veterans from a really famous trauma expert in East Georgia, Savannah. And so we acquired her instrument, and when we acquired this from her, we got all the notes and the data and everything else. And there was actually information there to prepare and create a version of this for first responders long before there was a COVID thing. And so we had everything we needed, and we actually just launched our tool for first responders to assess trauma, and paramedics, doctors, and nurses.
And I'd love to talk about too our conversation that we had, because that really what just, it was definitely, I knew right at the whole point of meditation. And then when you rattled off, when I said, Richard, tell me about yourself. And then you said, well, I'm a doctor with a PhD, psychology background, clinical psychologist, but also having this ability with these assessments, because one of the things that you said to me was, Michelle, you're our megaphone. It's so interesting to, and I pulled out this, this sheet, and I sent this to Rose, and I sent it to you, Richard, but it was, the first one is assessments. And then the process that I'm putting together, this Patterson playground, so that you can have your most joyful life. And I believe that we all, it's a human rights issue that we all should have 100% joy coming into our life.
Yes, absolutely.
100%.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to create this tool, because what we give people in the powers, and again, let's give a shout out to Laura Sicola, who coined the trademark for this thing. Powers puts the balance in work-life balance. And that was her genius, which she pulled out of thin air in 2 seconds too. But we created this tool because a lot of people, they don't know, they know they've got some issues or some challenges, but they don't really see a roadmap, and they don't know what they're doing great, and they don't know where they need some help. And they find that their life gets out of control. How many people listening to this, we can all identify with this, right? Like we miss one of our kids' dance recitals or basketball games because we're too busy with work, or we, don't get to socialize enough with our friends or family, especially now in a COVID world. And so what we really wanted to do was create something that gave people the roadmap to get their life back and to live it on their terms. You talked about this day for you, and it's the same thing for me. This has been 8 a.m. to now, and you and I are going to record again after this on my podcast. I am just as energetic right now as I was when I woke up, and I'm having so much fun. The day flies by. How you can really tell you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, or your life is in balance, is if you're doing something that really leverages all of your strengths and isn't impacted by any of your weaknesses. That wasn't true for me as a psychologist. I was a good psychologist. I was good with my patients. But the world I'm in now, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Just like what you're doing now is what you're supposed to be doing. And so, when you and I talked about your powers and how, oh my God, it described you perfectly. And that's the reaction that we were excited for.
You know what I got? 100% passion and 100% for my focus, like what I'm supposed to be doing. Isn't that crazy? I got 100%.
That's not a surprise though, right? Like for anybody who knows you, like, yeah, that, and I don't know you, Rose, but Michelle said that you felt like that pretty accurately described you, which is music, to the ears of a scientist who spent all this time doing this.
Surreal.
I got 100% passion too, Michelle and Richard. Mine was 100% passion.
And so, so the way that we do this is we look at these different dimensions. And so we look at your communication ability, and these are just broad topics. And then your emotional skills, like your empathy and your inquisitiveness, and how excited are you in your career? How are you in terms of wellness, your finances, your relationships? And we also tell you what kind of a communication style you have in terms of interacting with people. But then what the Powers does that's really cool and unique, instead of just saying those things, like it would have been enough, I think, just like most assessment instruments would have just said that and that's the end of it. But we actually have an algorithmically driven, very customized just to you and your results, this 30 plus page document that breaks down how your scoring impacts you in different areas, including relationships, workplace, conflict, self-care, success, parenting, and entrepreneurship. And so, then the cool stuff really begins, because once you have the roadmap, then, we continue to engage you after the fact. Again, like it's like my podcast. Like not I personally, it's not like I'm the Wizard of Oz, but the system algorithmically knows what your weaknesses are, what areas you need to improve. And then we've got friends or blog posts or book recommendations or things, and that can help you after the fact, because number one, you need to know where you're supposed to be going. But number two, you have to actually start taking action to fix those things. And we provide resources, as you do. This is why our marriage is so beautiful professionally, as that we get to combine these things and, what you've created with the Real Share, and a tool that can really put people on a map and see where they are right now. Because most people don't have a clue. They really don't.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, and this work I've been doing now since 2011 and that's why I'm so clear exactly this process, this playbook, in order for individuals to create their best life playbook, is to put them through the 5 to Thrive. And what we did with the California Women's Conference, and Rose, we took great pain to make sure that we were curating content that fell into career, physical, financial, social, and community. And what was so fascinating was career. It could be somebody that was retired. It was just showing and spotlighting how they're spending that time. Everybody has the same amount of time. What is it that they're doing in order to really, truly be living in their essence of time and doing what they want to be doing. And then you had physical, and that was having the energy to do the things that you wanted to do. Financial, I thought always was so fascinating. It was having the financial means to do what you wanted to do. And you talked about this earlier, is that the happiest people are not the billionaires. They're not the people that are making the most money on the planet. They're the individuals. Once the happiness meter, the roof over your head is covered and your basic essentials are covered, the happiness meter doesn't jump off the charts. It really is in your relationships.
It's interesting, right? Like we know, and we've got data around this, but our relationship with money is a lot like our relationship with people. So think about the courtship phase of dating. I mean, there are literally, we know that there are hormones that are released and that we're not rational. When we're first falling in love, like we are not rational. And it's the same kind of thing about money, like because we have this idealized version of what the relationship's going to be like. And, with another person, with a fancy sports car. So you're right.
It wears off.
That's right. And then
for a month or two, and you're like,
That's right. And then where do you find that fulfillment? Now, I will say that in my experience in interviewing hundreds of the most successful people in the world, and I've had billionaires on my show. I've had people on my show that don't have a lot of money, and I've had people on my shows that are literally billionaires. And the one common thread that I hear in the people who have a lot of money that think like we think is that, money's not everything, but what money allows you to do is have impact in the world the way that you want to have impact. That you can't have that kind of impact if you're not financially free. So
I think you
that
just nailed it. I think it's so important, especially for women, and doing the work that I've done with the California Women's Conference is that women feel like they have to really donate all their time, or they can't go ahead and get paid for the services that they're providing, and that's so far from the truth. If they are able to get paid for those services, they're able to do more with the money that they make.
It's very interesting. So and I'm not going to take this political at all, but I've had a number of people on my show that are very connected with conscious capitalism. And I hear people talk a lot of times about democratic socialism. And I think it's interesting when you think about these as constructs, because the conscious capitalists believe that with money, we can help everybody else. But the democratic socialists believe that we, in like common, not suffering, that's the wrong word, but that if everybody's at the same level, then everybody's equal. And I've had some really interesting conversations with people around this, because I think, again, like most people don't think about helping people by becoming wealthy. They think about, there's this common thought. You hear this a lot, like, and it's forever, like it's always been this way, that rich people are this, or, billionaires are that.
Or
and again,
lazy,
that's right. That's right. It works on both sides. And none of them.
The real share is because it's having the conversation with no stigmas, no fear.
That's right.
No judgment.
That's right. And so, I'm sure there are billionaires that are jerks. I haven't met one yet, although I don't know all of them, but I've met a few and they've been very nice, and so, and I'm sure that if we all were able to get in a room and nobody knew titles, nobody knew, backgrounds, nobody knew how much money anybody made, if we all just sat around and talked, what we would probably find is that there's a lot more that we have in common with each other than that's different. And I think that gets lost today in a lot of ways, but it's more important than ever that we really recognize that.
We're more the same than different, for sure. Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
I think that's comforting too to people that are searching for freedom.
Yeah.
I think that's really the common thread when we start thinking about that connectivity and recognizing, all of us on this call, we all share this commonality of like what's possible. If we start bringing this ideas together and we're vetting out, I have that last layer is made with love, and it's all the resources, products, individuals. I've got individuals like Sharon Lecter, that's part of my go-to to you look at Jack Canfield, you look at Dr. Richard Shuster. It's being able to put these pieces together, and people are coming to the table where they just want to share what they know, because they know it can help make someone else's life that much more enriched. All of us get to go. Like all I want to do is share that with our families, and we don't have to have the suffering. My grandmother, who passed away from cancer, she died wailing. She was in pain. I now know that's not my truth, nor now would it be her truth, because of what we know that's available on the planet.
Yeah. And because it's just fun for me, I want to drop a little bit of nerdy neuroscience on your audience here. We have these things in our brains called mirror neurons. And what's really cool about mirror neurons is, and I was interviewed by NBC for an article, but they wanted me to know, it was during football season, what happens to our brains when we watch football? And mirror neurons play a large part of it, but they play a large part in what you're talking about, that whether we realize it or not, what our brains are trying to do, and really our whole systems biologically are homeostasis. Everything's like a thermostat. And so if you kick it up too many degrees up or down, everything freaks out. And so what these mirror neurons are shown to do is they actually make us feel comfortable with sameness. It's why if you took two people on a subway and had them force them to interact with each other, because most people might just make angry faces like they're constipated on a subway, but they won't actually talk to each other, right? If you took those two exact same people and put them in a football stadium wearing the same jersey, and their team scores a winning touchdown, they'll be slapping each other on the butts and high-fiving and hugging and acting like, oh my God, like you're my best friend, mirror neurons. And so, we've heard people like Dale Carnegie talk about this, and Napoleon Hill talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And
the 5 people
that's right. There it is. There's the Jim Rohn quote. It shows up it's almost become like a running joke on my show because somebody almost always says the Jim Rohn quote almost every episode. But it's true. And those guys, obviously, Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill didn't have access to real-time diagnostic imaging in one's brains and functional MRIs to see what's going on up here. But it's true. And they knew it was true, but they didn't understand the science. And so if you find yourself, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I want to be like Michelle Patterson and feel that passion, you need to find people who will love and support your mission, whatever it is, no matter how ridiculous some people might think it is. You just find 5. If you can find 5 people who will believe in you and support you, and then you get rid of the rest of the noise and the people who tell you you're stupid, and that will never work. I actually,
I have to say this though. You just named off. I mean, Connor, Rose, Dr. Richard. I mean, literally, that's all I've been spending time with is individuals. They're not telling me what I want to hear, but they overall are supporting. We have the same passion, the same mission.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay to disagree. That's what the growth is. We have to disagree. We have to share, to help each other. We have to. That's how we have to learn from each other. So it's okay sometimes to have disagreements, but we all come back in love and same mission. That's really what it is.
So what I found, Rose, and there's so much. That's why I want to have you on tomorrow again. I'm serious. This is one of those shows where I'm just like, it's not enough for us just to have 1 hour. So I would love for you to be on tomorrow. I think too, there's just so much right now with putting together this process of creating your own playground and having your best life. And it's there for the going after. I mean, it's there for us. We have it at arm's length away.
If someone is listening to this and they're saying, I don't have these things, wouldn't you be willing to just take a chance to have that life? Having the knowledge in particular with a world of coronavirus that if you're living a happy, fulfilled life, you're going to have an increased immune system, reduced levels of stress. It's just so important. It's always been important. It's more important now than ever before. And, we can do another hour. I mean, I was just about to go into, the science of social media and how that's impacting all this because it's relevant. But
I want to talk about metaphysics too. And
metaphysics. Okay.
Oh yeah. I want to go there with you.
So this is wild. I'm a hard science guy on my show, but I actually just recently had a really wonderful lady out of LA named Laura Powers. Again, Powers. I knew we had to connect. Who's one of the most famous celebrity psychics in the world, and that was really interesting because, I'm trained in Western science, right? Like the medical model, but I, especially after my car accident, I have a very healthy respect for that which we don't yet understand, and I think in the case of metaphysics, it's really just the case that the science and technology hasn't caught up with what somehow this knowledge has been downloaded into us over many, many generations. So let's do this again tomorrow. That'll be a lot of fun.
That'd be great. And Rose, I wanted to put up, because you put on the chat too. I love, and I know Rose really, really well, your comment about not wanting to be fixed. And I really resonate with that. And I feel like Dr. Richard does too, because that journey that we went through, for me, it was the diagnosis with breast cancer, being told I had 90 days to live, and then having the best year on the planet. I think Dr. Richard, what you went through and just, thinking you'd never walk again. It was insane, the story that you went through, and how you really got after it and were like, this is what I want to create for myself. And this is the life that I want to have. And this is what I want to put out there. And so when you talked earlier about metamorphosis and, and again, I'm looking at all healing modalities that are out there. And what we're doing is starting with cannabis. And you've heard, my story with cannabis of shrinking my tumors 52%. And so I think the more that we can share and come together and recognize, I think, Rose, you hit it, you just nailed it. And that is when we get to fix ourselves with the information that is available on the planet right now today. That just completely puts us into a place of total loving ourselves. We absolutely, the only thing that's stopping us is ourselves. Literally.
We have the core. We are the core. We have the strength. We need the knowledge, the new knowledge, right?
And to have it from trusted advisors, people that, really love just being in a space of togetherness where we share like-minded thoughts of wanting to support and share and help. I recognize that I can't do this by myself, but I do recognize that collectively coming together, my life is 10x. My life gets a whole lot better when I start playing with other geniuses that care about humanity and the citizens that occupy Earth.
There's a really cool analogy I've heard from enough people to where I recognize this as truth. And it's a business analogy, and the people who are successful in business figure out what they're really good at and get out of the way of themselves by not doing those things that they're not. And it's the same thing with your relationships. It's the same thing with your home life, with your interactions with your sons and daughters. When we focus on what we're awesome at, and then we surround ourselves with people that have genius in these other areas that offset our deficits, that's it.
That's it.
That's the victory.
You build a team. You build a team around the strengths that you don't have. Those are the people you want on your team. So you make a very solid leg or three legs of that solidness of what you need.
And this is the flower of life. It's what my band of brothers, when I was in Mexico, and I was partnered with the 61 men, and they had one female, me. Here's this woman who puts on these conferences, but this is what it is. It's the flower of life. It's being able to come and do your genius. And because of being part of this collaborative, model, I view myself as part of your team, Richard. Rose, I know I'm part of your team. You're part of my team. And so we can absolutely pull this together and figure out, based on the assessment, exactly what we need to solve and present healthy options.
It still is, to bring it back full circle, crazy how we came together and the circumstances. And we've had this much fun in 3 months. How much fun are we going to have in 5 years? It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome. Well, I'm now going to bounce over. So tell the audience where they can find you, and then we'll do this again tomorrow. But Dr. Richard, tell them about your show, because we'll have them come from my show over. This has all been live.
Oh, hold on. We're getting, I had silenced my phone, but apparently we're on a curfew. So I'm going to actually shut my phone off. So you can check me out at drrichardschuster.com. And I know my name is complicated to spell, or not spelled the way you think it should be. So I bought every possible domain combination possible. So I challenge you to spell drrichardschuster.com. However you want to get there, you'll get there. My podcast, which Michelle and I are about to jump over to in just a minute, is called The Daily Helping: Food for the Brain, Knowledge from the Experts, Tools to Win at Life. And this show is all about you being the best version of yourself. And our show's mission is to help you get there day by day, be better than you were the day before. And our movement is called the #MyDailyHelping movement, where I encourage all of my listeners to commit acts of kindness every single day and post in your social media feeds using the #MyDailyHelping. And if you want to check out the powers and you are curious to hear how your roadmap looks like it was for Rose and Michelle, you can go to seekyourpowers.com and check it out. And it sounds like I'm going to be back tomorrow, so I'm going to keep talking to you guys.
Yeah, and partner with us, because what we're doing is, again, creating this wellness team family so that every single person can experience what they want, what they come up with their needs assessment, and then put it into action, put it into play, whatever it is that they want. So I'm excited. This next project is working with 20 individuals to get them through with their wellness team family, starting with the assessments.
Awesome. It's going to be so much fun.
All right. Wonderful. If you want to play, and then I'll be jumping on. Thank you so much, Dr. Richard. And we're going to go ahead. We won't be doing, unless Connor, if you want to start the sound up, we'll dance off for 30 seconds.